Welcome to Frisella's All Around the Yard. I am your host, Tony Frisella Jr. Along with us today, we have Zach Ignotz with Frisella Landscape Group in our design department. Zach, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Doing good.
So, if any of you remember, Zach was on with us several episodes ago, or maybe more than several, and we talked a little bit about landscape design. And with this beautiful 70-degree weather that we are having in the St. Louis area, what better topic to talk about than landscape design? Because we know if you're listening to the show, you have an itch, and that itch is to get out in the yard. I know that's what mine was last night. Literally, I got home. I drove as fast as I could get home before the sunset. Got my shears out, went out and started trimming all my bushes real fast, like a madman. Looked like Edward Scissorhands guy, just going throughout the whole yard. Because if I didn't get done last night, I wasn't going to get done.
Yeah, I went and just cut down all the ornamental grasses and everything, and cleaned stuff up so that it was ready.
Yeah, it's exciting. And you see the buds swelling. We're about 3 weeks early. I
got some hyacinths coming up already.
There's a lot of bulbs coming up all over the place. There's all these commercial sites down Chesterfield Valley. I mean, the daffodils and everything are popping out of the ground.
Got some irises too. So
it's coming. But let's just make sure everybody knows St. Louis is always subject to that winter sucker punch. End of March, beginning of April.
You're not safe till like late May. Then you know for sure you're good.
Late May is a little extreme, but we always say October 15th through April 15th is when you want to.
Well, yeah, that's a safe bet, but I've seen frost in May before. It's rare.
I saw snow in May 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Like May 1st, something like that.
I'm real paranoid. So I'm like, well.
Anyways, so what Zach and I will talk to you guys about today is some aspects of great landscape design. So now that it is warm, you're out in the yard, you're like, I wish everything would just come to life. You're probably getting some big, grand ideas, which is awesome, and we want to be a part of those if at all possible. So we want to give you a few things to think about and chew on while you're looking at your yard. And so we're going to jump into a couple different topics that we look at when we're designing landscapes. And the first one is that I want to bring up is the scale of your home or your yard. And what does that mean? It really just means the size of your home relative to the size of the yard, and also keeping the scope of the landscape, the size of the landscape, relative to the home and yard itself.
Right.
And
so there's, I mean, that's one of the aspects that we look at, but there's also this sort of, you can manipulate it to a degree depending on the effect you want to achieve with your landscaping. So, for example, the design we're doing near your house, the guy doesn't want to dwarf his home. And it's already a massive, beautiful house. So we don't want to plant a bunch of oak trees in the front. Even though to scale, it's a big property, it's a big house, that makes sense. That's not the look he's trying to achieve. He wants something that's going to make the house look much grander. So you go smaller scale stuff, it kind of brings the house up. And you can do the same thing if you had a huge house and a huge property, but you want to make it seem smaller, then you just do a lot of really big stuff. So you can manipulate it to achieve what you want. But as a general rule, you want to keep things sort of to scale with the area you're working with.
One of the notes that I saw when it talks about scale is not putting large trees next to small houses. And I'm like, that's all, perspective also. That's the other thing about landscape design, everybody. It's personal opinion. It's like artwork. Like what was it? You could put a duct tape a banana to a wall and call it art. Like
you can now.
To each their own. Right. Now we're not saying go out and put duct tape a banana to a tree or anything like that. But I sometimes see these homes, or when I was over in Europe, where they had they're much tinier homes. And they had these big hedges of evergreens. They don't have fences over there for most cases, and so they do a lot of hedging with like Leland cypress. And Leland cypress get monstrous, but they just shear the heck out of them multiple times a year. Yep. And they create these green hedges that are anywhere between 4 and 8 foot tall, and they're probably about 4 to 6 foot wide, and it's between the neighbors and everything else. So just keep in mind, it's really the look that you're after, and just understand that if you're going to put a large tree, use it in a setting like this, it's going to require maintenance. What's really cool is there's a lot of cultivars of plants being bred every single year that are able to be used in more niche scenarios, such as bordering in between homes. If you have I'm gonna call it like my old Glendale house, the 2-bed, 1-bath bungalow. All I wanted was privacy, and it was in a shotgun lot in Glendale. And I would, I didn't do it because I moved out in time, but what I wanted to do, my dream was to just run green giant arborvitaes all the way down the property line. Now, yeah, they would have grown over to the neighbor's side, and they would have sheared their side, but I had every intention of creating this beautiful hedge. If I would have stayed there for about 4 or 5 years, they would have been at least 14, 15, maybe even 20 foot tall, depending on the size I started with, because they grow 3 or 4 foot a year if they're happy, where I could create this almost tunnel vision all the way down to give a dramatic effect to the shotgun side of my house.
Are you like a fan of the European aesthetic?
It depends.
Because that's also very European. And a lot of that, like, setting can play into how you use stuff like that because, a lot of the cities in Europe, they're just really old. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were started construction before city planning was really a practice that a lot of people did. So you notice there's a lot of like sort of spiderweb streets. They're very narrow. They're alleys. Sometimes you have houses that open up into, a 2 foot wide alley. And so vertical and narrow is very common in some of those larger European cities. So having those tall, narrow shrub hedges fits with the general aesthetic of the city itself. Where in the United States, we have so much space.
A lot of space, yeah.
So we're used to having yard and room, and so our landscapes tend more towards like large deciduous trees because we have the space for it, and more just sort of foundation plantings around the edge.
Yeah, so that kind of jumps right into focal points. I mean, there's so many things you can use for a focal point in your yard.
Yes.
And if you don't, some people use a front door as a focal point. So the thing about focal point is not just a tree. It could be a lot of different things. Do you want your front door, front porch to be the focal point of the yard? Do you want an old 300-year-old oak tree in your front yard to be the focal point of your yard? When you look out your back window to the backyard, is there a certain view that you want to make the focal point? So you need to add something more of interest in that view because that's what you look at every morning when you're drinking your tea or drinking your coffee, or maybe you're drinking a glass of wine in the morning. I don't know, but
I'm not.
But what are some things that we can do to add a focal point element?
Yeah, so focal point is the first thing I think about when starting a design, and especially in residential landscaping. Usually the front yard is easy because it is the front door. I always tell people the front yard is for your neighbors, the backyard is for you. That differs by person, but there's a reason you don't put patios in your front yard. You don't want to go hang out in your front yard. That's more so that the house looks nice.
In the city, though, so many small lots, they do have patios in the front.
That's true, and that's where setting kind of plays into it. But most of the time, you want people to know immediately, like, that's where I go. If I'm trying to reach the house, I go right there. And so the front door is sort of the focal point, and there's ways you can reinforce that. And then in the backyard, you kind of get to pick your focal point. You go, what do I want to be the focal point? And it can be anything. I mean, it could be a specimen tree. It could be a fountain or a small water feature you put in there. It could be a smaller patio. It could just be a view that you have out the back. Like Rich's house, he's got that great view in the backyard, and you can establish levels of.
We frame because there's woods on the right side, and then we're introducing a lot of trees on the left side, more columnar trees to really create more of a tunnel vision over the pool.
Right, and that's a way to establish a focal point. So a lot of the other stuff we're going to talk about, I use as a way to reinforce the focal point. And you can have layers of focal point where, if we're using Rich's house as an example, the foreground focal point would be the pool. But then past that, you have that view.
The field is awesome.
Right.
The kind of rolling hill back in the woods.
And so you have 2 layers of focal point along the same axis, so it makes them both more impactful, which can be a different way to do it. If you have a smaller lot, you could do something sort of immediate to the house where it's like a small fountain or a sculpture or something you have out there. And then farther back in the lot, you have a specimen tree, and then you design everything kind of around it to help emphasize those points. And you can do that by adding contrast. Maybe you have a specific theme going on for the rest of the yard, and that's the one thing that stands out. Then your eye is immediately drawn to that. That helps
you might have a lot of greens
that.
And whites, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a Horseman Atlas cedar.
Right.
Or a Globosa blue spruce, or 3, not Colorado blue, but like baby blue eyes.
Right. Just something that just really pops out when everything else sort of feels together. You can isolate things. If you have a real lush landscape immediate of the house, and then you just have the one thing out, past the yard. Your eye's going to be drawn to it because it's the only thing to look at.
The other thing is too is when you're thinking about landscaping is if you have any lighting at your home or you're thinking about adding lighting, you can also change your focal points at nighttime.
Yes,
which is pretty
yeah,
cool.
that's always really fun.
So it has what's lit is what gets seen.
Right.
Obviously, it's common sense, but if you could have one of the most robust, dense landscapes, but you can really go in at nighttime and play with the different textures and the different colors of the leaves and of the foliage to really change the dynamic of the landscape. And what a small, intimate yard could almost make it seem like a larger, more entertainment space, more robust, 3-4 times bigger because the light starts to play with illusions with your eyes. And this is kind of the same thing with plants. I mean, we have different scales of plants. You can really play with how you perceive a space, whether is it actually is as small as it seems. Well, depending on how you might lay out plants or might lay out a patio, might make it seem larger, such as using like a herringbone pattern on an angle. Can really make a small space feel larger. Little simple things like that. And most people are like, I never even knew that before.
And with lighting, I like to do the opposite. Is if we have a really big space, I'll use lighting to make it feel more intimate when it's dark. Because if it's daytime, you're having a football party or something, everyone's coming over to watch the game, it's probably going to be light out. You got all that space and you want more people there. As the night goes on, more people kind of trickle out, and then you get back down to like just your core group of friends, and you want that space to feel a little smaller, a little more intimate. Then you can use lighting as a way to keep the immediate area lit while making the area farther out seeming darker, less accessible, and it makes it feel a little more confined and cozy.
And that's the fun part about the lights.
Yeah, there's so much you could do with it.
So visual rhythm, so basically that's not monotonous, but it's having repeating themes throughout a landscape.
Yes.
Now, I break this rule at my house, but in my front yard I don't. But in the backyard, it's fair game for anything.
Well, and landscaping is like art. The rules are there to be broken because breaking the rules creates emphasis. And so visual rhythm is just
on that? Should that be like a little quote, a little meme or something that you put on Facebook?
Maybe. Because, I'll do it. I'll follow like 6 of these 7 things, and then I'll break the one. And that's the one that people are going to notice, which you can use to your advantage to draw the eye where you want it to be. And visual rhythm is just sort of, it's playing into the human innate need to like find patterns. You're always looking for patterns in anything you look at. It's just an instinctual thing that we do. So if you can use the pattern, it helps people move visually through a space, and then disrupting that pattern causes you to stop on that spot. So if you have, and this can be done in any number of ways. If your house roof line has a specific angle, repeating those kinds of angles so that it all sort of feels unified, and you go, okay, this is all like intentional and planned. And then you have, boom, one thing that's like circular. It's going to stand out. You're going to see that. So using the rhythm to establish a pattern, and then, for instance, with a focal point, you can then break that pattern to cause emphasis.
So, well, the other thing is also just think about the plants that you're repeating, the hydrangeas. So you could have, you might have incredible hydrangeas at the front of the house, or if you have a smaller, like I said, 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow, you could do the Bobo hydrangea, which is a smaller version of it.
Right.
But you might do 3 on the right side, 3 on the left side. Or you might, if you're wrapping around a corner, you might be able to get 5, 2 in the front, 1 in the corner, 2 on the side. But then you might do 3 on the right side. They don't have to be evenly numbered balanced, but the colors have to balance through it.
Right.
Or if you have a larger home, or say in the backyard, going from the left to the right, you want to keep that repeating color, the white flowering thing throughout it. And then you may want to add, actually, boxwoods are kind of cliche-ish, but let's say birdnest spruce, which some people are like, what? I think they're kind of cool personally, the right setting. But you want to keep that repeating textures also, same thing through. It's not just a flower, it's not just the evergreen, but it's also the texture. You don't want to have like a birdnest spruce and then a boxwood and then a yew. It's going to look a little it's going to look a little cluttered. Now my backyard, my front yard, I have boxwoods throughout the front. I have 2 paperbark maples framing my home. I have 1 large Persian Proddy on the corner of my house, and then I have a couple Alaskans on the right side to kind of balance out the heaviness of it. And then throughout the sides, I've got 9 bark and the same repeating perennials, the same repeating shrubs. all across the front. So it's all very balanced. But you go to the backyard, I have a Arizona ice cedar, I have a magnolia, I have one Alaskan, I have one cinnamon barberry.
Chaos.
I have three. I have three spirea. I have like six. What is it? One of the grasses, prairie dropsy grasses. I got a couple catmint. I've got one Cummins blue spruce. I've got one green cascade Japanese maple. I mean, I've got a couple incredible hydrangeas.
Right.
It's like I said, I'm rambling, but that's literally what my backyard looks like, is rambling.
Well, and the rhythm
cool.
doesn't necessarily have to be one aspect. It can be so many different aspects. I mean, it could be the spacing of steppers through a garden. It can be the repeating of like a radius of an arc of something throughout the landscape. It can be colors. It can be texture. It can be, I mean, like switchgrass and prairie dropseed more or less have the same texture, different forms. You can use those, right, and you can use those to repeat the rhythm of the texture without having to get monotonous with the form and the specific plant.
And the other thing is with all the plants I just rambled off, I have seasonal interest.
Yes.
And so that kind of leads into is even though you want the repeating, but you also want repeating of things that are going to give you interest in the 4 seasons.
Right.
So like the barberries and newer barberries, I love them. I think they're great. Because the color on them. One of my favorites is Tangelo. Looks like a tangerine.
It's a cool one. Yeah.
If you've got it sounds, but you say barberry next to a pool. Yeah, I'm gonna say barberry next to a pool because the color, a tropical look and feel that it has. You get some bright colored planters with some awesome splash of color with the annuals. You've got a tropical theme in the backyard. Add in some tiger eye sumac and maybe a couple bigger, broader, interesting evergreens like the Alaskan cedar.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it looks like you're in a tropical place.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely amazing. But then you have, early spring bloomers like the magnolias and the cherry trees, which are getting ready to pop here probably the next, week, maybe, if we keep having 70-degree weather. You've got things that are going to come in with good summer color. Again, I talked about the tiger eye sumac. Most people don't know what that is. And if you don't know what that is, check it out. It's a slow grower, but it has this like crimson yellow foliage to it. Which is beautiful, has awesome fall color as well, so you can get a double whammy with it.
And it's a Missouri native, so there is no lower maintenance than something that grows here. Well,
it depends. Hey,
that's true. There are some people that are very
crazy about it.
They're particular about it. So, yeah, that's true.
So,
that's true.
It's a native R, which means it's a cultivar of the native plant.
Yeah.
But it can still be classified a native depending on which book you look in.
Birds are still going to eat the seeds. That's all.
So. Think about is moving in the summertime. That's when like the incredible hydrangea, bulbo hydrangeas, and then your roses, some of the newer roses, like the Drift Series roses, also easy roses, those start blooming in May. This year they might even bloom end of April, beginning of May. I know I just trimmed mine back last night, and they all had the red new growth, always starting to pop off the branches. Like, no, not yet. Got to cut you back.
Right.
But I mean, those will bloom. Those will bloom monthly. Those will bloom throughout the summer from May, June, July, August, September, sometimes even in October, especially if we've got the weather that's conducive for it.
Yep.
So you want to be thinking about where is the color splash going to be? Spilled wine Weigela, dwarf Weigela. It's about 3 foot wide, 18, 24 inches tall, blooms in late spring, early summer, but it has these deep wine red foliage to it. So you use the color contrast.
Yep.
So thinking about these different themes, these different ideas, these different colors, the way different things are going to work in the landscape.
And that is another way to play with rhythm and focal point. We talked about lighting can change the focal point from day to night. Seasonal interest can change your focal point from season to season. So what might be the focal point 100%. In the summer is not going to be the focal point in the winter, especially if it's a specimen deciduous tree. So you can design in a way that in the winter you have a different focal point, one that I would put, probably closer to the house. You're not going to be outdoors as much in the winter, so you want something that's a little more visible from indoors. Or even in the fall, maybe there's one tree that has really striking fall foliage, and you want that to be the focal point. So you can kind of design things so that when one focal point fades, another one really pops off.
So we just talked really fast about several different things, and probably in no order. Everybody's like, "What are these guys just rambling on here?" But there's so many new plants coming out in the market that. Man. You really need to spend some time understanding first what you want, what you're trying to achieve, and then, for expediency, talking to a professional, about, what can I get what's going to work well in this space, because there might be a lot of plants out there that will give you your spring blooms that you're looking for, but you may not have the soil that's going to be conducive to producing those blooms without a lot of work. Now, if you're willing to put the work in, which is, amend the soils, all that kind of stuff, hey, no problem at all. But there might be a better solution out there for something that's newer to the market that will scratch that itch that you have for that space or that performance that you're looking for out of whatever kind of plant it is, whether it's a bloom, whether it's a color, whether it's a growth habit, etc. It's a very fun industry to be in because it is ever changing. There is so much technology going into breeding new plants. And there's so much effort that goes into breeding plants for some of these niche uses. Again, whether it's tight and narrow upright, whether it's longer lasting blooms, whether it's to be more clumping because it's more of a spreader. All these different kinds of things that plants do that we're trying to manipulate and trying to control in some varying degree. Whatever your thoughts are on that, it can go either way. But there's a lot coming out, and there's a lot of uses for it. So as you're planning your yard, we would love to be a part of your process. And look, if you want to do it yourself, come to our garden center, bring photos, bring ideas, take pictures of things you like and that you don't like. And
use us as a resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We would love to help you get the look that you want and guide you along the way and help you be successful with it by steering in the right direction to, one, pick the right plants, two, help get the right soil amendments that might be needed, and give you the right maintenance instructions or make the tips and tricks to maintaining certain plants, because every plant has maybe a different way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to give us a call, 636-798-2555, or you can email us, podcast@frisellanursery.com, or find us on any of our social media. Feel free to direct message us, DM us on any of our social media platforms. We would love to get back to you, get in touch with you. And if you get the garden center, just feel free to ask. We are here to help. We have a passion for helping you all with plants. That's how this company was founded by my grandfather in a side yard in Ferguson, Florida in 1953. So it's a lot of fun. So we look forward to working with you this spring in 2021, getting you out in your yard. We know we're coming off a heck of a year for 2020. And I look forward to being a part of your gardening adventure. So, until next week, talk to you soon.